this is part 2 of working with your inner GPS, your inner global positioning center, which I had said in part 1 is not only global, but it's multidimensional. And in part 1, I had given you just a few of its functions, but I'll review those just very briefly today. But I want to also stress that every person born has this inner global multidimensional positioning center or system, and it's wonderful because it helps us to see in a much vaster way who we are and where we are in our lives and the significance of that very place in our lives, so that we can live our lives from a much vaster consciousness and really more joy, because we can see always a much larger dimension of what we're involved in. Last time I had said that this can release tension or stress during a crisis. And I had given the example of my husband when our son was dying in the hospital. And I had quoted also the psychiatrist Carl Jung when he said that he knew that he always had to allow the emotions to release the images that were hidden within them, because when that happened, he was calmed and reassured. So this system speaks in a symbolic image language most of the time, not always. It really will communicate in many ways. Sometimes we have just an intuition of something or a hunch. We sense something. This is all part of that system. In the West, we've become so accustomed to not being aware of it that we don't often sense when it's talking to us or when it's trying to communicate to us. But the more we learn how to relate to it, the more, of course, we are able to receive its messages. But I mentioned last time how when Istvan was in the hospital and we thought that Pishti would die, our son Pishti would die within that hour, his emotions were so great that I thought he might have a heart attack. But he told me later that he too thought he might have a heart attack, but he said at the highest point of stress, that energy just exploded into images. And while he still didn't know whether Pishti would live or die, it wasn't that it answered that question, but the question was no longer meaningful in the way that it had been before, because what he experienced was the knowledge, the wisdom that Pishti was eternal, that they could never be separated, and that their love could never be destroyed. So it placed him in a much larger dimension of understanding the situation he was in the moment. And it did change him. I think it probably saved his life in the moment. So that's a second function, is that it helps us to have a much larger perception of the situation we're in. Now, on a basic level, I had talked about how it can prepare us, and I'd given you many examples from my life and said that I would give you some more from Istvan's and Pishti's life in relationship to the death that was coming. But I had told you how I was prepared over 2 years, and I knew in some level of me the images had been recorded of what was taking place or going to take place. And I think that prepares the whole nervous system. But on the other hand, on a conscious level, while I worried about some of the dreams for a while, I found a way of looking at them symbolically. And a dream is never just one thing or the other. It can be functioning on many different levels. So I found meaning in those dreams outside Pishti's actual death. And so I could go on still knowing and not knowing. But something, and this is a point I want to make as clearly as I can, that these dreams, even if we forget them, the images are within the nervous system, and those images calm us, reassure us, and give us a strength that we might not have otherwise. One thing I forgot to mention last time, and I think it's a very significant dream in my own preparation, was that when I was pregnant with Pishti, I actually had a dream that I worried at the time was about him, but when he died and I put all of the various dreams together over the years, they fit like a puzzle. I couldn't see that puzzle while I was alive, and I'm very glad I couldn't. But it was over a long period of time, and that's why we often live with images or forget the images, but they always are available to us and transforming us in the way that we need. But the dream when I was pregnant with Pishti, was that I was in the country in my mother's old schoolhouse, which was just a small, I'm sure it was just a one-story schoolhouse, but in the dream it was 2 stories, just one room, one above the other. It was dark. I went in. I immediately went upstairs. Upstairs was dark. I saw an old man sitting in a rocking chair facing me, and he was smoking a pipe. And then over to his left were many Chinese lanterns, but they all were dark except for one. One was long, beautiful, illuminated, pulsating with the light. And I knew that it was life, that it was the life that was going to be born through me. And as the old man smoked and the smoke came out, a painting formed facing me so that I could see it. What a beautiful way to make it very clear I'm being communicated with about something very important. And as I looked at it, I saw in the bottom corner, and it was quite dark, the painting, I saw a young man coming in carrying a bag with not much in the bag. Now, of course, in those days we didn't know whether we were going to have a boy or a girl, but in the dream it was a boy, a young man. And he walked very quickly, and he was coming to a gate, and I saw that the gate to him was death, but the gate to me was life. I thought that was also a beautiful way of showing when we are born, we leave one dimension and come into another. But when we die, we go back into that dimension. And we experience them in different ways depending upon which dimension we're in at the time. But he walked just a short distance and he immediately turned quickly and climbed up the mountain and then went out the top corner of the painting. And it was at first multicolored and then a brilliant white light, and he was gone. But the old man was still there. And I knew that the old man was the soul. He was co-creating with the universe, his soul, into time and space through me. And I knew we have that agreement. And he stood up and came toward me and touched my hand. Suddenly there was a table of food, and I said, "Oh, wouldn't you like something to eat?" And it seems kind of frivolous from one perspective, but it's very mythological. Because he answered in true mythic form when he said, "You have no idea how much I would like to, but I can't." And of course he couldn't, because he was of another dimension. The beauty of the dream was that we touched, that we were still in touch with each other, even after the death of the child. And this, I think, is so profound and significant that for all parents who lose children, that is the question. Will we ever see them again? Are they still alive? Are they somehow lost in the universe? It's that sense in the Western world that we don't know what happens after death. But this dream showed me very clearly, of course, he is where he's always been. But I saw that the child coming in was a creation of that personality for perhaps not much work, because there wasn't much in the bag. Now, I wanted to tell you also, which I didn't mention last time, that Ishtvan and Pishti too had a preparation of the coming death. Now, Ishtvan had it 2 weeks before the accident occurred, and Ishtvan was not someone who had been concerned with these matters. I'd spent my life being concerned with them and trying to find connection with something meaningful, if indeed there was. For many years I didn't know. But I had gone to Peru right after I finished my doctorate, and when I came home I was trying to tell Ishtvan a vision that I'd had, and I really wanted to communicate this to him. I don't know why I waited until he was reading the LA Times. I don't remember that, but that's what I was doing. I was trying to tell him something when he was reading the Times, and of course he was more interested in the Times than he was in my vision. And so finally I kind of gave up, and I said, Ishtvan, you're really not interested in this, are you? And he was honest, and he said, no, I know what you're telling me is true, because I know you. I know that's what you experience. But I have never had any kind of experience like that in my life. And I just can't relate to it. Well, I appreciated the honesty. And I knew the kind of person he was. He was compassionate, loving, open on so many issues. And I thought that really does explain where we've all been, probably, in the Western world. Is that, well, not all, but most of us, certainly I had been there. I was always interested in it, but I didn't always believe that these things really happened. And even after Pishti's death, I had a hard time realizing and holding on to the fact that the world is as miraculous as it is. When I was in the vision, I knew. And when I wasn't, my left brain, trained in the Western way of rationality, tried to tear it apart and say this couldn't possibly be true. It was too vast, too miraculous, too loving. But thank God, after Pishti's death, Istvan changed completely and he became my anchor. So that was a wonderful thing. But he changed very much after his death. So now the vision that Istvan had 2 weeks before Pishti was in the accident, he was in his study working, and the images, the vision, simply intruded into his work and stopped everything. And he literally saw Pishti's car on the side of the freeway, and he saw Pishti's body superimposed on it. And he knew that Pishti was dead because there were 2 different dimensions. One was superimposed on the other. And that was horrifying to him because it was so real. But suddenly within him came the knowledge, and he heard himself say to himself, "That's right, Pishti. It's almost time for you to do this." And that was horrifying, that he could accept it, that he knew, and that it was a plan for Pishti to do this. Then he heard Pishti's voice say, "That's right, Dad. I will be out of the house for a little while." Well, Istvan, it was so horrifying to him, he totally became unconscious of it. He didn't remember it until the phone call came through. And he said in the moment when the phone call came, he knew Pishti was going to die. During the 13 days that our son was in the trauma center, he thought, well, maybe that's not true. He will live. But, of course, he did die. And we understood later what Pishti had meant. I will be out of the house for a little while. He had to go through the process of moving from one dimension to the other. And then the day that we had the memorial, which was 1 week after his death, Pishti did return. And we had many visions with him. Not only did he talk to us about our own lives and why we were living and making the choices that we were, but he was talking, and why he had died, but also what the earth is going through. Clearly, we were and we all are a part of the dream of our planet. And if we awaken to our work and our aligning ourselves with the dream of the planet, then we see ourselves in such a much larger dimension, and we can do our work with much more joy. Now, let me tell you the dream that Pishti had when he was not quite 12 years old, which was about his death, which would occur at 20. It was quite a precise dream. We had talked about dreams, so Pishti told me his dreams, and we would work with them, talk about them. And this is really a wonderful thing if parents do have that kind of relationship with their children, that the children tell them their dreams, because it really does help parents to know what is bothering a child or what is going on at a deeper level of their psyches. But one afternoon, he said to me, I was vacuuming the floor, and he said, "Oh, Mom, I had a dream last night. Will you write it down?" And I said, "Sure." So I turned off the vacuum, got a pen and paper. I realized later that, much later, I saw that he had drawn the pictures and that he had written it in his own journal. So I used his journals and for writing the book, because he actually had a record of his experiences too. But he said, I'm in a trauma center. I've been in the operating room. I'm up above the hospital looking down at my dead body. There's not a ceiling, there's not a roof. I see right down to my dead body. And he described the operating room and the trauma center with such precision of white and off-white and where everything was and chrome. It concerned me because it was so precise. And then he said, there's a space of darkness, and then I'm in another dimension, and I'm in a semicircle, and there are 4 boys on one side, 4 boys on the other side. I'm the 5th. In the center is an eternal fire, which cannot be put out. And it is burning, and I see across that fire an aura, that's what he called it, an aura of a 10th boy. We're all waiting for him to arrive, and when he arrives, I know it will be me, and I will be complete, because 10 is a number of completeness. Well, this was quite a dream for a child who's not quite 12. Indeed, 10 is a number of completeness, and he was waiting for that part of him, that experience that he had on the earth, to come and complete him. He didn't understand what that meant. I didn't either. And he said, Mom, what do you think the whole dream means? Oh, we talked about things. I said, maybe it means that you're being transformed. You're growing into a young man and no longer a boy. And we worked with that for a while and pretty much left it at that. But there were aspects, obviously, of the dream that went way beyond that. I worried about that dream for quite a while, but then I was able to let it go because one could try to look at it in many different ways. But I think that, of course, when he died, I went back to all of his dreams, preparing him for that death, and of course Istvan's and my own. And that's when you begin to see, of course, a pattern. When you put all of these things together, you begin to see a very clear pattern. So sometimes we simply live with images and we don't understand them, and that's all right. Even if we forget, these images are imprinted on the nervous system, and they do what they are intended to do. Sometimes it's to prepare us, to help us to deal with it, to give us a greater knowledge. Whatever it is, those images stay in the nervous system. But I was glad that he had written his down and had drawn the picture. I was glad that I had too, because I knew then so much more. I had proof, if we want to call it that in the Western world, that this GPS works. It really works. But Pishti had another very profound dream when he was 20. It was in the year of his death. He got up one morning. He was getting ready to go to school. I was getting ready to go to school to teach, and I was making cappuccino for both of us. And he said, "Mom, I had a big dream last night. In fact, it was just that morning." And after he told it to me, I remember taking his hand and saying, or touching his arm and saying, "Oh, thank God it wasn't you. But write it down. We'll talk about it later," because we didn't have time then. And I totally became unconscious of it. I never remembered it again until after his death. His girlfriend Chene and Istvan and I were in his room going through his poetry and other things, and Chene said, "Oh, Betty, look at this." Well, when she read it, of course, I knew that was the dream he had told me. And I'm going to read parts of it because I got this dream from his journal, where he had, from his actual words, and it helps you to see his personality a little bit better. He said, "I dreamt that I was sitting on a large couch in a strange, cozy house lit by candlelight. My mother came in and sat down. We both fell asleep. I began to see hundreds of small white lit candles. I began to chant in a slightly higher voice, and I had quite a powerful chorus. I shot out of my body and landed on the front lawn. Instantly, I heard my mother grunt, 'Come here,' in a severely low voice. I raced in through the doors and walls without touching them, replying, 'What?' I can still hear and feel my chanting. I saw an empty bed and couch except for my sleeping mother. I then awoke and carefully walked out so I would not wake her. Later, I went back inside to join my awakened mother. Did you hear my chanting? Yes, she answered. It was very clear. Everyone in the house heard your chanting in their sleep. Then, you are truly afraid, aren't you? No, I answered, not really. I then crawled into bed and she left the room. Suddenly and quite quickly, I got a very strong tingle around my body and saw a blinding white light surrounding my body. The touch of the edge of the blanket against my shoulders was very irritating, so I pulled the covers over my head. I could see and feel the light fighting through and trying to get in. I'm not a chicken, I said, as I stopped resisting it and gave in to it. I could see the fabric then strip away before my eyes as the light forced its way in and sucked me up. I shot straight up out of the house and out of the atmosphere at such an incredible speed that I did not even have a chance to see the street lights as I rose above the city. I flew away from the earth and then whipped past the sun, continuously gaining speed. I melted past worlds and suns at such a speed, and it was so intense that I felt them pop as I approached, then vanished, and I could hear the gentle wisp as they belted away around me. I landed once again on the front lawn, and I heard the same grunt of "come here" and my "what" response, but this time my mother's voice was louder and desperate sounding. I came inside and saw my mother by the side of my bed with me in it. He's not in good shape. You have to come back for him, she said. As I observed my behavior in bed, I looked like a drooling idiot. I couldn't handle the entire experience in one swallow, and I said, I will. I'll be right here. And I stumbled out the door. Then he has an experience of having a huge crash, and then he's in the hospital. Someone is working with his body, and a voice from the other side is saying, he's been reduced to a vegetable permanently. And Pishti is looking at the body, and suddenly he realizes, that's not me. And whew, he's gone. And of course, when I read that dream, I realized when I had said to him, oh, thank God it wasn't you, well, I suppose we can all say thank God. Our bodies are simply our bodies. And the spirit that creates us, the essence of who he is, could then go on his journey, continue his journey. I was very grateful for that dream. And I thought it was so amazing that it was almost like a rehearsal for him. I said in the hospital exactly what he has in that dream within the year before it happened. I had said when we arrived at the hospital, Pishti, if you choose to live, you can live and come back whole. If you choose to go, come back for the body. Don't leave the body. Because I didn't want the body to be on a support system and the spirit gone. And I said, but if you choose to go, we will let you go. Now, I'm not even sure where those words came from, but you know, we are so much more than we know who we are very often. And in a crisis, there's something so ancient, so strong, so vast, so prepared, and because of this inner GPS, this inner soul psyche that's in touch with the quantum field. After his death, Istvan and I had many experiences, not only about our lives and how we were together and why we made the choices we did and why Pishti died, but some of them are complex, but they're in the book. But I want to give a couple of things. The first vision that Istvan had was, well, for him it was, remember this, he had had the vision 2 weeks before Pishti's death. He had had the experience in the hospital. This time he had a powerful, long experience, and when he sat up on the bed, we were listening to music, sort of shamanic music, and he had this vision. And when he sat up on the side of the bed, he said, I had no idea what you were talking about all those times. I will never look at the earth in the same way again. And he didn't. I went through, as I said, a difficult time because I was afraid that something so beautiful could not be real, and he became my anchor. And he sort of is a witness, a testimony, I should say, of how even when we know nothing about it, we've not paid any attention to it, when we open ourselves, it can be fully present. Sometimes, though, we have to work at it. We might have to jumpstart it several times to get it to do much, but there are various experiences we can have with it. Now, in this experience, he said there's really no way that I can tell you what I experienced, but of course we always try. He shot through a tunnel, almost like what people talk about in a near-death experience, and he saw at the end of the tunnel a circle of light. He was moving toward it, the light was moving toward him. And when they got closer, everything became so sacred, so loving, so profound. And he could see the image in the light was Pishti in a yoga position holding the earth. It's the icon, actually painted by Robert Lentz, that's on the front of the book. I saw that icon in a store afterwards, and I thought, no matter what, that has to be on the cover of the book. It looked just like Pishti, and it was the exact image that Istvan saw in his vision. And it made him realize that we are the earth. The earth is us. It is our body. And he said that he realized, in a way he'd never realized in his life, that love is the key to everything. And he said Pishti explained how respect allows us to be more conscious of love. But he said, I have to say that I have never experienced respect like I did today. He said, it has a completely new meaning for me. I respected myself and everyone and everything else to such a degree that the whole world was sacred. Now, these are experiences that are available to all of us. And if we allowed ourselves to be in a position to receive and to experience who we really are and what we're about, everything would be changed. The whole environmental problem that we are faced with would be transformed. We would know what to do. That love, that respect, the reverence is what are necessary for a real creative relationship. Then he had, I'll just give you a piece of another dream, and I was going to give a couple, but I think that I'll just leave those and end with this one from Istvan. He was in the meditation room, Pishti's room. He had painted it about 2 weeks before he was in the accident, and he had put up the shamanic paintings of Susan Boulay. So we were using it as a meditation center room. And sometimes I would hear Istvan in there when he said he had gone in to meditate, and he was snoring away. And I thought, well, that's a fine meditation. But one day when he came out, he told me, he said, I guess it was a dream. He said it was so real. But while he was snoring, he had this incredible vision. I saw universes, he said, creating themselves, absorbing themselves, and recreating themselves, but not necessarily in that order. It all seemed to be happening simultaneously. There was only now. Now, every visionary will have an experience sometime or other in which time is realized as now. It's only now. Everything is now. Whatever time dimension we put on it, it is now. And he said everything was energy, but this energy was love. And it was a love that was so powerful that it shot out of itself as material worlds. It had to create as universes. But no matter how much it expanded or changed its forms, it could never be lost because there was nothing but itself. I experienced this from the inside out, from the heart. but I had the mind of a physicist. But Pishti said I wouldn't be able to hold on to the physicist knowledge when I came back, and I can't. But he said to me, though, that there are physicists and other scientists on the earth now who are beginning to understand some of the basic principles of life that have not been understood in the past. And we certainly do see this in many of the physicists today. Now, Istvan didn't know about them then, but many of them who've worked with quantum physics and have actually had inner experiences that verify their understanding rationally, these people are changing our view of the world. Thank God that we're living in a time when it seems that we're opening up to the visionary, and at the same time our rational minds are opening up to the larger dimension of the universe. Pishti told Pishti at that time, and we had many experiences with him about the earth, he said that consciousness on the earth is going through a powerful transformation, that we're actually becoming a new species. And he said that the children are going to be born, he said, I saw it as a new circle of DNA, but maybe that was just symbolic. He said it was maybe a way of the vision to tell me that the children of the future will be knowing what we are struggling to understand. And he said, I felt that if we can heal ourselves, we can give them this gift. In other words, he saw that so much of our work today is to understand this larger dimension through physics, mathematics, through our rational minds, and at the same time to also make a connection with this inner positioning system, this global, multidimensional system that is our heritage as human beings. And when we can make that connection and live in the full now of both the physical and the spiritual realities, that we will have integrated them in a living, creative way, that our children will be born with this gift.